Oil prices starting the week on a volatile note. Yesterday, WTI saw its biggest gain in 2 weeks, finally. Something to talk about. After a larger spate of violence erupted between Israel and Hezbollah. Also, the government in the eastern part of Libya said it's not going to halt exports. That's what Helima says is that most important. Helima Croft, RBC Capital Markets global head of commodity strategy and a CNBC contributor. That's bigger than the shooting?
Well, I think it's a really important story, Libya, because that's a physical disruption that we're looking at in Libya. Whereas since the war in the Middle East broke out in October, it's always been a hypothetical. Is there a pathway to disruption if Iran becomes involved, potentially? In the case of Libya, the Eastern Regional Government can turn off Libyan production like a light switch. General Haftar, he's the militia leader in the east. If he wants to shut it down, he controls all the terminals in the east, the infrastructure, so they can shut it down. And we've seen since 2011, since the Arab Spring, since the death of Gaddafi, tremendous volatility in Libyan production. And so the question is, are we in now for a period of a sustained outage? Is it something that can be solved quickly? If you look at the last 10 years, it's been really up and down, though, in Libya.
So let's go to the other fear that you say, like it's hypothetical whether something happens. Again, restraint on both sides. Can you tell what's happening?
It's so interesting. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago.
We did.
We had the same playbook. And that's actually kind of what the White House was hoping for. It would be less than or equal to April. And they kind of got that. And what's interesting is that you look at both Iran and Hezbollah, like they're willing to play it in the gray zone. Like Iran is much happier, it seems, to give the money and the weapons to its proxies and tell them to have at it. They don't seem to want to become directly engaged in a confrontation with Israel. I think they'd be afraid of potentially an Israeli strike on their nuclear facilities.
That's what we talked
Tougher
about.
Enforcement of sanctions. I mean, look at Iran right now. I mean, you look at a country that's putting their oil on the market, it's Iran. And so Iran has a lot to lose in a direct confrontation, hence why they're willing to sit back and basically let their proxies fight the war. Let the Houthis fire their rockets. Let Hamas do the fighting. Hezbollah, it's a kind of a similar situation. They're sending a lot of rockets into Israel, but they're also not willing to have Israel invade like in 2006.
And not nearly as many rockets as they could send. And someone earlier this week or last week said that they're afraid to give Netanyahu an excuse to go after the nuclear.
I think that was Firas, who you had on.
Yes.
He's fantastic, by the way. He's the best one on Lebanon. I think he's absolutely right. Like, they don't want to give the Israelis an excuse to roll their tanks across the border, push them off the border, because Israel has a really interesting dilemma right now. There's 60,000 internally displaced people from the north of the country. The question is, do they permanently cede that territory because they're too afraid of rocket attacks? Or does Israel go in and try to force Hezbollah off the border? I don't think we know yet how that story is fully going to play out. But now it's sort of a contained escalation.
In recent years, there's no way anyone could really go after the nuclear facilities in Iran. But after October 7th, and if this were to get worse, and if there was one more thing that really, you could almost say, okay, well, Israel was left with no other choice.
Exactly. That's why we have to still continue to cover this conflict, because we are still one big, miscalculation away from a wider war. And again,
or a mistake.
A mistake, exactly right.
A mistake that could force somebody's hand.
It's kind of a fog of war situation. When you don't know the other's actual aims, you can have a mistake. And this whole thing could still go into a wider war. Again, everyone's playing it within the dynamics of a contained escalation. The question is, does that really hold?
Well, the slowdown in China or something has made it so that oil has not, the worst case scenario for
we just haven't
up
seen that.
Hasn't happened. And it would be bad for inflation. It'd be bad for a lot of reasons.
Think about it. It's amazing.
It's boring. I wanted you to say something exciting today.
I told you I have guns, whatever. But it is an amazing story, Joe and Becky, that we have the Russia-Ukraine war still going on.
Yeah.
We have this war in the Middle East, and look where oil prices are.
But the world is well supplied, I think.
And I would say U.S. policy has been designed to keep foreign oil on the market. Our sanctions policy on Russia avoided targeting Russian oil. Iran still continues to put their barrels on the market.
We pretend like we're trying to stop it, but we didn't.
Well, we've gone after other parts of the Russian economy. But I keep saying price caps were designed to keep Russian oil on the market. Yes, we said we tried to cut the amount of revenue they took from that oil, but still it was designed to keep the market well supplied.
So it's been a tight range. It used to be 40 to 120.
We'd have these wild swings, I know.
Yeah. But now it's been 70, 75.
So we've got some interesting questions. Again, continue to pay attention to the Middle East. If this Libya outage is prolonged, that's important for the market. But OPEC has decisions that they have to make, too. Do they start putting barrels on the market? Do they take a pause? I think a lot of people are waiting to see what comes next with OPEC.
All right, Helima, very good.
Thank you for having me.
It's pretty exciting for, not being, we still haven't gone above 80 or below 70. For how long?
Well, again, look to what happens. I think the next signpost will be what happens with OPEC.
Aren't we hoping for some?
I don't know. Sort of. It's fun to watch things happen.
You like the shocking on oil prices?
When it went to
stability.
That was bad when it went to a negative number.
I like a little stability.
But over 100, that's been in the cards for a lot of people, and it hasn't happened.
I think the China demand story is really what has put a cap on this for the summer.
Okay.